Hello everyone, my name is Andrew Ibrahim, and today I will tell you why the World Wildlife Fund is the best land animal charity to donate your money to. So today more than ever, the world has been plagued by human industrial practices, especially as we see an exponential increase in industry, coupled with many burgeoning countries reaching the stage of their demographic transition to where they're now going through the industrial stage. So many of these industrial practices left unchecked have led to the major poisoning of many of our ecosystems and loss of biodiversity and animal life. Between 200 and 2,000 animal species go extinct every year. And that's something that the World Wildlife Fund attempts to address, this biodiversity crisis that we see here on our planet, mainly as a result of us, humans, the one species that has resulted in many species being lost. And so what the World Wildlife Fund is, it's essentially an international conservation organization leading in its field, probably and likely the biggest one that does actual major projects in the field. And so the WWF's goal is to develop and deliver innovative solutions that protect communities, wildlife, and the places in which they live. And so, of course, that's very important. In order to protect wildlife, you must conserve and protect the environment in which they live in. And so the WWF mainly looks to kind of change the trajectory of the course we're taking right now in species loss and habitat loss, and kind of change that by heavily conserving global forest areas to sustain the amounts of biodiversity that inhabit the life, that inhabit the forest life. Number two, conserve threatened or endangered wildlife species and preserve the wild spaces they live in. And so again, if we can preserve those habitats, then we can result in more biodiversity being able to be encompassed here in our planet. And three, lessen the effects of climate change by transitioning to a world less reliant on those fossil fuels, which require us to go ahead and harvest a lot of these resources from the earth, not only leading to a loss of those resources over time, but also a loss of habitat, again, for those endangered species. And so those all sound like nice goals, of course, but it's important to kind of place a tangible way we can approach those goals. And so it's good to look at where the WWF began and its inspirations. So WWF draws its inspirations from the idea that this natural loss of our world affects us all as human beings. There's not one human being that won't be affected by this loss of biodiversity and essentially the loss of our planet. So to meet this very tall goal that you heard me mention, the WWF calls on political leaders, which essentially have the ability to enact political change and policy change, to commit to this new deal that they've essentially drafted. And this new deal supports the halting of nature loss, whether in terms of biodiversity or natural habitats, by the year 2030. And so if we can take action today, then we can reverse some of these effects by the year 2030. And that's very hopeful. But that's not going to happen immediately. And so there's very tangible steps that the WWF has put into place to make this work. Firstly, the WWF will work to convert 30% of all natural habitats of these endangered land animals to protected areas and forests as well. And so currently, many of the projects that the WWF puts in place is relating to local governments and seeing if they can't designate some of these areas as protected. Secondly, in order to kind of prevent more species loss, the WWF targets overexploitation and trade and illegal poaching, encouraging sustainable practices instead. So many of these are ways in which the WWF accomplishes its goals. Some specifics of this, for the past 30 years, the panda bear has been endangered. So the WWF has coordinated with the Chinese government to establish a sort of conservation network and reserves. Another example of this is the same with the tigers. Tigers are wanted for their skin and bones, and so The WWF was part of a program that attempted to double tiger populations across the world, and it's successfully showing that tiger numbers are booming across the entire planet. Ivory is a very luxurious product that's sought after from elephants and rhinos. The WWF has worked with the American and Chinese government to prevent ivory hunting whatsoever, and kind of crack down on those illegal poaching. I'll kind of skip over why WWF is better than other organizations, but essentially WWF is a little better because they do those projects themselves. It's very direct, other than as compared to other organizations that like to campaign instead of do the work, and they use their funds very wisely. In fact, more than 80% of their funds is actually for the projects rather than paying off their staff. But kind of heading to the ethics of why the WWF is a very important charity to donate your money to, I found myself this semester following the deontological lens and approach to ethics, one that focuses on moral duties rather than outcomes. So Kant preaches that some actions, no matter their consequences, ought not to be done, and I find it very applicable to this case. The WWF and I have a strict and rigid no poaching, no illegal hunting approach. Even illegal logging of timber trees, I think that's just not correct. And I chose this organization because their foundations are very morally sound. Unlike the Nigerian government that allowed Shell to poison their lands for economical gain, the WWF would condemn such a practice. And I wholeheartedly agree with our rigid moral standing on this moral issue. It's the only way we can kind of curb these endangered species from going extinct, like we've seen. Also, as we've progressed through the semester, I found myself relating with Tom Reagan's position on animal rights, which he says animals have inherent value, and that means they have a right not to be killed. And so no matter how nice ivory is, or no matter how nice tiger purses and furs are, animals have a right not to be killed just like humans do. And this manner of thinking is adopted by the WWF, and I agree with it as well. And just to throw some divine command in there, the Bible gives very strict commands on how to treat animals, on how to respect the creations that God has put us with, on this planet with. And so if you throw in divine command, that only adds up to it. But the WWF is where you should donate your money, because they preserve animal rights, animal life, and proper animal treatment. And I can think of few better uses of one's money. Thank you.